Welcome back. Today I'd like to talk to you about my personal shelter experience. Yesterday or the previous video, I spoke about is it better to go with the shelter or with the street if those are actually your two choices. But what I decided as it got a little long was to go ahead and create another video where I'm just talking about my experiences at the Catholic Charities shelter. And that's the only shelter I've stayed in. So these are my experiences. They don't necessarily reflect yours. They don't necessarily reflect everybody's experience that's in that shelter. But I do believe that in general my insights are pretty spot on. So I'm going to share what it was like for me as a resident of the Catholic Charities shelter. Now, the first thing I'll tell you is that they don't like you to call yourself a resident. I was threatened to get kicked out by the day manager, by the manager of the day shelter, because he accused me of becoming too comfortable, and he's told me that means that I want to stay homeless. The reason I used the word resident was because if I'm a client or I'm a guest, there's a feeling of temporary existence to that. Now, yes, I want it to be temporary, but I also want it to be something I can count on. So I use the word resident, despite the fact that that bugged them, because I felt like we were a community. And just like I feel like in Las Vegas, the homeless community is a constituency with special needs and should be treated by the city in that way, rather than treating us as a blight on the community. But I'll get into that another time. But the first time I stayed in the shelter, I had no idea what to do. But luckily, I found a bottom bunk, and I made my bed, and I sorted. Of course, I didn't know anybody, and it's basically pretty freewheeling once you're up there. There's about 600 beds. They say they serve up 500 per day on average. I don't know where they're averaging that from, but I'm going to use the number 600 just to be on the safe side of where I believe the number is. So the thing about the shelter, as I said in the last video, is that you have to follow the rules. You have to go through security. You have to turn in your bag, and you have to have your toiletries in a Ziploc bag. All that's pretty reasonable. Where it runs into trouble is if they catch you with a pencil, or they catch you with a grape or something. They're going to really overreact, like you're trying to sneak in contraband. When the reality is, plenty of guys sneak in contraband because it's easy. I worked for TSA as a security screener. I can tell you that watching how their screening process is not very good. So I never tried to sneak anything in because I had no reason to. But once you're upstairs, people want to start selling you candy, selling you earbuds, different things, hats, which of course isn't contraband, but still the idea of the homeless selling to other homeless, especially when they're selling things that were given to them out of charity. Anyway, I'll just give you a few anecdotes about my experience because I basically went over the shelter experience yesterday. And for me, it wasn't very good. I mean, my first week there, my wallet got stolen. I was stupid. I trusted people, and that was stupid, but I didn't have a guide. There's no orientation at a shelter. Now, some shelters may do that, and they should, but people need a little bit of direction just because you don't know what you're going to expect up there, and you have no one to turn to, really, if you have a question or you have a need. The security guards, they're not there to protect us. They're there to control us. So that way we know that if we hang a wet shirt up on the railing of our bed so it can dry overnight, some guards are going to tell you that's a violation, and some are going to ignore it. So there's some instability in terms of the rules and in terms of the people that are around you, but eventually you find your way, you find people you can trust, and you try to stay around those people just because you have a comfort level with them, so that when you get up there, you make your bed and you want to go into the shower, you don't have to worry that your stuff's going to get ripped off, or you don't have to carry it all into the shower with you. So safety is a pretty important issue. Noise is another one. It's very loud. The lights aren't turned off until 11 o'clock. So if you're, in my case, disabled, we were able to go up at 3 o'clock. So that's 8 hours roughly of noise and of light, the lights being on. And then from 11 to, and then at 6 o'clock, the other residents come up, but they have to line up they have to actually leave the campus, line up on Main Street at 4:30. If they line up early, the police will threaten them with tickets. So it's just a constant struggle just to even wait in line. And I like to say with that, if I had to define the homeless experience, the one thing I would say is a constant, and that's you learn how to wait in line, because you're going to wait in line sometimes for an hour, for 2 hours, just to go from A to B. You're going to wait in line to turn in your bag for the night shelter, and then you're going to wait in line to pick it up, and then you're going to wait in line to turn it into the day shelter right across the courtyard. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I think it's a waste of everybody's time. But in a sense, it's one more thing to control. It kind of deadens us. And then when you are waiting in line to go into the day shelter, you're going to be uh, supposedly wanted, but again, as a screener, they don't know how to use those wands, and you're going to have a breathalyzer. Day shelter holds, I'm going to guess, probably about 150 or so. Once that's full, you can't go in, and you can't hang around at in the courtyard or on the property. So, you're really in a position where you're rushing around. Hurry up and wait, I guess is the best way to put it, because if you want to go into the day shelter, which I used to do, you can watch television, but you're going to get yelled at a lot. If you try to plug in your phone in the wrong place, if you put your phone up front where they want you to put it, there's a good chance it's going to be stolen. And that's on us, the people, we shouldn't be stealing from each other. But that's just what happens. When you have a shelter where everybody's welcome, it sounds really good, except that there are people there that don't need to be there. There are people there that go there to steal. And there are people there that just choose to be there and don't have really any desire to leave. Now, they will leave because they'll eventually find jobs, or they'll move on and do this or that, but they'll cycle back from time to time, not because they're desperate, but because it's a part of their lifestyle. That's not counting the people that are suffering from mental illness. If you're suffering from an addiction, you're going to cycle in and out according to the needs of your addiction, because there's no treatment for that, and there's no counseling, and there's no plan. One of the reasons why I came up with this program was that I felt the shelter should have a program like this, where they are telling you, helping you to do it for yourself, give you the tools to decide, how do you evaluate your past experience? What made you homeless? How did you get there? How do you get back to where you want to be, where you prefer to be, where you need to be? You can't, it's not, I don't really think it's a 12-step program, because, you can make amends with people if you want. You can say you're not really powerless over homelessness. So I think that example sort of falls apart. But you can work through a program, and I will talk about that in a few more videos. And I will have, the checklist and the various tools available to you. So keep that in mind as we're just laying down a base. Now, if you're sick at a shelter, the one thing you have to realize is that there's nobody there to help you. I was very sick with an ear infection, and this was around Thanksgiving. So it was chilly for Vegas. I know it wasn't really chilly, but for me, walking around with the earache was miserable. I went to the day shelter manager and told him what was going on to get his advice. He told me not to go to the hospital because they won't do anything for me. Now, the other thing you have to consider when you're homeless and you're staying at a shelter is that whatever you choose to do later in the day, it's going to keep you out for the whole night, because you can't say, you can't reserve a space. So you're basically that's part of the battle. So I chose not to go to the hospital, but then I went and asked a security guard if he would call 911 for me. I thought maybe I could get some quick assistance. And his response was that I needed to go find a payphone and call for myself. So unfortunately, 2 days later, my fever spiked, and as I was going up, I'd gone through security. I was in really, really, really bad shape. I was delirious, basically. I was going upstairs, and I fell. I just collapsed. The head of security was very, very irritated by me collapsing like that. And he told one of the other homeless guys to help me, to get me out of the way, basically. And by the time I got upstairs, it was clear that I was very sick. 911 was called, and the staff did help me at that point to get me out of there. But between that incident and another incident where a gentleman fell out of a top bunk and was basically treated again as an annoyance, not as with sympathy, as I understand it, the director of security was fired. I spent a week in the hospital. I didn't have insurance, and we're going to go over all of that, how you can get insurance, how you can work through the obstacles, because you may be at a shelter where they're helping you with everything, or you may be in a shelter like Catholic Charities where you have to know what to ask for. You have to know who to talk to. I had a crisis homeless counselor or something like that I asked to copy 2 pages for me. And because she had given me her card, I emailed them to her because I needed to renew my food stamps and I needed to get Medicaid. And her response was that no, she wasn't going to do that for me, and please don't ever email her again. Now, later I sort of learned that there were some other things I could have tried, but for that moment I lost my food stamps because someone wouldn't copy 2 pages for me. So some of this just sounds like gripes, but it's the gripes and the times that you're turned away or you're not helped the way you think you should be are the times where you can think of solutions, where I can look back and say, okay, this happened to me. I couldn't have prevented it from happening, but I can, in hindsight, I can think about how I would help myself or to advise someone else to put themselves in a position where that doesn't happen. Now, I was eating 1 meal a day, so that meant at the hospital, because I was very sick, I had sepsis and I lost some of my hearing, but I refused to eat because I wasn't used to eating, except for the small meal at 10 o'clock. So the nurses had to basically treat me for malnutrition and eventually get my strength up. And because I didn't have insurance, I was discharged even though I couldn't walk. So luckily the drugstore had a cane they could give me, and I sort of made the most of it. But it was a horrifying situation, and one that could have been prevented at the very beginning. So my shelter experience, I appreciate the fact that the shelter exists. I don't necessarily appreciate the fact that it's open for anybody because, it's one thing to give us a breathalyzer. It's another thing to have people staying there, taking up beds, and leaving other people out in the cold, or at least out in the elements, when they're just there between their checks on the first. It's not as easy as I'm making it sound or as simple, but the reality is that if you're one of the people that have it together enough to work to get yourself out of homelessness, I'm going to help you. Okay, there are plenty of people that aren't going to get out of homelessness either because they're not getting the treatment they need, uh, or because they're just in that cycle of being homeless. They've given up, and it's better than nothing. But for those of you that want to get out, survive, make a life for yourself, I'm going to help you, because if you're in the shelter, it's a maddening experience. It's the madness of the crowd there. So your mind is going to break down a little bit from the waiting in line, especially those moments, which in Las Vegas isn't very often, when the staff literally makes you stand in the rain in the morning to get into the day shelter. That's that's not just uncomfortable, it's dehumanizing, because they wouldn't want to stand in the rain with you, and so the old um, you won't treat people the way you want to treat people the way you want to be treated. And I have to apologize just so you understand. Um, I'm not, for one thing, I'm not using notes because I don't want to read to you. I've written all of this out, but I have a good sense of what I want to say. And so I'd rather be a little more spontaneous and just talk to you as if we're talking one on one. But I do have to say that recently I was diagnosed with possible early dementia. I have to get a brain scan Wednesday. So uh, if you see me stopping because I can't remember, you know, something that's totally obvious, it's because my short-term memory is not what it should be. For example, I can't tell you, I wouldn't be able to recite my phone number and my address. So I have a cheat sheet. But I can tell you where I lived in fourth grade. So it's very much frustrating. But I don't want you to feel like um, wonder why sometimes I kind of get stuck, because that's just the nature of things, and that's why I'm trying to do this urgently, because frankly, there's at least a possibility that I'm not going to be all there after a while, and I want to do something to help everybody that's out on the street that's able to benefit from help. The final thing I'll say is that you can contact me at ron.moore.writer@gmail.com. My phone number is 702-601-4502. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you need. I want to hear your experiences, because there's thousands of shelters and they all may be different in some ways. I'll try to lay down some basic principles and basic steps and give you the tools to follow them. But there are things that I haven't experienced that you have that might help somebody else out. And so that I can, and also if you wish to tell your story, how you became homeless, what your outlook for life is now. Um, if you wish to share that with me, and you don't mind me sharing it with the audience, let me know. So I'll leave it at that for now. I appreciate so much the folks that are supporting this effort. And for now, I'm going to be building a library of videos and building an audience over time. It's going to take probably a long time, but for now, I just want to do this while I'm able to. And I want you to know that, if you're able to get out of the homeless lifestyle, do it the right way. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to someone is to get a free apartment or get moved out of homelessness before they're ready, because they're coming back almost every time. So it's good if you can prepare yourself for living back out in the mainstream world, how to avoid the mistakes or the obstacles you faced before you became homeless. My attitude is that homelessness starts way before you lose your housing. It's a way of becoming untethered from society. So you may lose your job, marriage, you may lose relationships, you may have an addiction, you may have a mental illness, or you may have a criminal record of some sort. All of these things are loosening the ties to society for you. The fact that one day you became really homeless and you were on the street or you were at a shelter, that's not the first day you were homeless. But first, that's just the end result of all that untethering from society. So I'm here to give you some tools to tie that back up and to be ready and to be a success. Thanks so much. I'll be with you again soon. And please spread the word, homeless helping homeless. Thank you.